right, we're back. We're bad. And we've got Yvette with us. Yvette, welcome. So great to have you.
Hi, I'm so sorry that we didn't have a good connection before. Are we good now?
Yeah, we're good now. It's just
okay. Are we live now?
We're live now. You're
okay,
on.
Good.
I'm delighted to have you. Thank you very much for being here.
Glad to be here. This technology is humbling all of us over a certain age.
Yeah.
I know I've had the struggle is real. I've had it as well. So glad
I hate to take the struggle is real to that.
I mean,
but nevertheless,
it's a new world.
It is. It is. For those who are just joining us, Yvette Simpson is with us. She's CEO of Democracy for America. Are you in Vermont today? Where are you, Yvette?
I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is where I hail from. Yeah.
Fantastic.
So our headquarters is in Vermont, and we have staff around the country, and I'm in Cincinnati.
Fantastic. Great to have you with us.
Great to
Democracy
be here,
for America was launched by Howard Dean in 2004 after his presidential run then.
That's
right. It has worked to put more progressive candidates into the ranks of Democrats running for office. They've got about 1 million members across the country. They put up slates of candidates in every election. You've been with them for several years now.
Yes.
They were big Bernie Sanders supporters. If you go to their Twitter page, there's a big splash photo across the top of the squad.
Yes.
And so it gives you a sense of where they're coming from. Mm-hmm. We invited Yvette here today because she has got such a sharp mind and a sharp tongue, and we want to put all that to work with us and think with her right now. I saw you as results were coming in, talking with George Stephanopoulos.
Yeah.
And people began talking about how, all right, we've made it through. It looks like it's going to be a Democrat. It looks like it'll be Biden Harris. Is it time to pull together now for unity? And you had this you came right back and said, unity is great, but freedom is better.
Yeah.
And you went right on with that to say, it's not enough just to get together and hold hands. People have been waiting and working for change for a long, long time. And let's not get all lost in kumbaya.
Right.
There's real action that needs to take place.
Absolutely.
So we've invited you here to ask, do you see it coming? You were not a Biden fan from the start. He is putting people on his economic team who have been super critical of Bernie Sanders, where your heart and resources were. So as we sit here today, it won't be Trump. It will be Biden. It will be Harris. Where does it leave your ambitions, your thoughts, your hopes, your expectations as a progressive Democrat?
Well, you can't be a progressive without having some optimism, right?
Yes,
change is hard, right? You got to believe that the future is going to be better. So the reality is that we're cautiously optimistic. The early appointments that we've seen have been not surprises. And we've been overwhelmingly, I think, pretty pleased with what we've seen. But as you know, when you're an activist organization, when you're trying to bring change, you have to continue to fight for that. So we don't expect that we're going to be able to sit back and all of these things are magically going to appear. We believe that we win what we organize for, and that organizing doesn't stop after voting. It actually continues. And our organizing goes from the streets and voting to now organizing our people to push change forward in the top levels of government. And so we expect to have an ongoing, what I call family conversation with our party and with Joe Biden and his administration about how we continue to make sure that results and real change happen. And honestly, I don't know that we will know that until we get there, right? We will know once we actually are able to see real policy and real changes happen. And so we don't think this is going to be an easy, smooth, all of a sudden kumbaya moment at all. In fact, we think that real change will have to continue to work for, and we're prepared to do that.
Now, don't get soft on me, Yvette Simpson, because I know you're tough. And I read
you
on November 18th, and that is well after Democrats came to expect that it would be Biden and Harris. And here you were writing what I expect. This is you. No new vision, plus same players, plus same plans, plus same excuses equals no impact for people who need it most.
Mm-hmm. And I also said what we're fighting for is these things. And so here's what we know. Real change means fighting, and we're going to have to every step of the way, because what we know is that Joe Biden and his administration are listening to a lot of people. There are people who they call it lobbying, I think, on that side, to make sure that their interests are met. And so we don't expect that this change is going to happen. We're going to fight for it. And so our expectation is once he gets his team on board, we have heard him listening to the voices of progressive people. You know, there's a lot of lobbying and organizing going on to make sure certain individuals don't become a part of the cabinet. But what we know is that real change will come when we can see it, meaning real action on the part of real people who have been waiting on the world to change, real action to make sure that we're resolving the issues that currently exist in our country as it relates to racial injustice and racial unrest, real results to make sure that we're working for the 99% and not bending and breaking and bowing constantly as we do for the 1%. And so, yes, we are lobbying, pushing, organizing for people who will at least be open to the progressive perspective, which I actually think is the perspective of most Americans. We don't believe that progressive is far left or even radical or unheard of. We think that it is where most Americans are, that most Americans agree on the issues that are progressive. We just believe that a lot of our leaders are not serving that. They're serving this very small interest. And we can talk another time about why that is.
Well, if you're right, if
Mhm.
Americans are generally progressive, and I know you can find polls that say that, your organization has put out these polls on healthcare and right on down the line, 70% plus who can fall in line with things broadly that could be described as progressive. But then we've had candidates, Bernie Sanders, who explicitly and boldly have stood for those measures, for those steps. And the Democratic Party has been very ambivalent about those candidates. And you've got people on the Biden team, Neera Tanden, who he's put up to be director of the Office of Management and Budget director, who's gone hammer and tongs after Bernie Sanders. And you know she's not alone. Are the Democratic Party leaders blind? Are they deaf? If you're right, what are they missing?
I think the question is, who are they serving? And so what I believe is that when we have candidates in leadership that are serving the interests of people, you will have alignment, right? You will have alignment between where the people are and where the leadership is and where the policy is. And the challenge is, for so long, we're serving money and corporate interests. And it used to be back in the day, and I will honestly say we've never done this right. So I don't want my progressive folks to be like, Yvette, don't be giving too much credit, because they've never done it really right. But there was a time when the Democratic Party was aligned with serving the interests of people and families and working families and people of color and the broad electorate, all the people in our, and then what happened was, and Republicans have almost always consistently been in line with serving the moneyed interests, the corporations. And over time, what started to happen was Democrats were like, you know, particularly money in politics, we can get in this game. We've got to get in this game. Let's see if we can find the good corporations that we can support, right? And so then all of a sudden, the leadership of both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party were serving this very small group of people, which left all the rest of us to be served by no one. And that's where progressive policies and candidates started to come out and say, wait a minute, who's serving the people? If Democrats and Republicans are both serving money, which, as you heard in my comments, is where we always serve and where we need to not serve, who's serving the interests of people? And so the progressive movement is trying very, very much, I'm going to borrow Joe Biden's word, to bring Democrats back to the soul of our party, like to bring us back to our soul, our founding, our foundation, and to remind them that there's a whole lot of people out there. And I actually believe, and I said this on the show, the Sunday show after the election with Heidi Heitkamp, I actually believe that the interests of rural America, of urban America, of suburban America are aligned. We all want clean air. We all want to make sure people have a fair shot. We all want to make sure that we have racial harmony, that we combat systematic racism. I believe we all think that we should have access to free public fair education. We believe that everyone, I think that's true. But the question is, are our leaders serving us, or are they serving the interests of people who frankly don't need government to make the world change, right? They will be fine no matter who's in power. They have always been served no matter who's in power. And so the question is, and I believe the answer is yes, the Democrats should be and get back to our soul, which is serving the people. And I think if they do that, they're going to find their party our party not just serving Democrats, but actually serving the broad scope of Americans who currently aren't being served by anybody.
Okay, I've got so many questions just off of what you've just said. First of all, we all agree that we want racial harmony. I am not so sure about that. If harmony means peace, yeah, everybody wants it. But there's obviously a portion of this country that is happy with a racial peace that sustains white succemacy.
The majority of Americans, I believe.
Okay, that's different than all.
And
okay,
I'm gonna demonstrate it. The majority.
Okay.
So when I talk about, I mean the most, we're not talking about the 1% in any of this, by the way. So I want to make clear that we're talking about most people, and
okay,
I think a super majority of people.
Most I get. Yeah. Okay.
Most. And I believe, and I believe this to be true. I believe because we saw during the George Floyd protest really showed how many Americans from many, many different places, many strata, when they saw that video, when they realized there was not going to be justice and that justice was going to be hard to come by, said this isn't right, right? And they stood up and they said, we have to do something about it. And I think that reflects the majority of our country. And I think even a super majority of our country believes that. And I think that needs to be, I think, what helps Democrats move forward in understanding that they have support if we just focus on that. If we just focus on that and make sure that we've got policies and changes that meet that need.
Listen,
70-some percent of Americans support the Green New Deal as a philosophy, but I would say even more people support the fact that we need to do something about the existential crisis that is climate change. I believe that a supermajority of people believe that we should have access to healthcare, that nobody should have to choose between having insulin or paying the rent, or having food and having healthcare. I think that, and the data shows this out, a supermajority of people believe that. And a majority of people believe the way that we get there is through universal healthcare, single payer healthcare. So I guess what I'm saying is that Democrats shouldn't run away from policy issues that are uniting across urban America, across rural America, across suburban America. That is the all that I'm speaking about, that are unifying, and that we can actually put forward those policies, and we will find that we will win if we actually work towards that ideal.
Democrats lost a dozen seats in Congress in this election.
And you know why?
Where's your victory parade there?
Well,
what's the logic?
Well, I'll tell you. We didn't lose a single seat for folks who supported or were co-sponsors of Medicare for All. Every single incumbent who supported Medicare for All won re-election. We know that there were progressive candidates who had won and flipped red seats in 2018. Progressives, Katie Porter, Mike Levin, others who were in these very, very red seats. They won in 2018. They kept their seats. The folks who compromised on progressive policies, who pushed this anti-Trump country over party, let's not talk about real issues, let's not talk about how we're going to serve you, they were not reelected. And so my point is that when we talk about issues, when we talk about the things that really matter to people, whether you're talking about people who live in the country or people who live in the city, whether you're talking about people who live in the suburbs or who live downtown, I think what we will find is that you have this broad coalition, the 99%, who will come along with us and believe and actually support those issues. And then we won't be running scared every 2 or 4 years, because we will actually be serving the people. When most of the leadership, whether they be Republican or Democrat, are supporting this very small interest, that's when you start to get folks feeling disengaged, not wanting to participate in the political process, not believing that their world is going to change. Because frankly, their world hasn't changed no matter who's been in office either, for the negative.
Yeah.
And so what I've said often, which I think is really important, is moderation. So we call Democrats moderates. Moderation is great if you can afford it. And there's a lot of people who can afford for us to take our time. But the vast majority of people don't have that kind of time. They can't afford to moderate. They can't afford moderation. They can't afford slowdown. They need help right now. And those are the people that I think we need to support.
I have so many questions off of this. You've said thinking about those who like moderation because it doesn't really mean change, if it's that kind of moderation. You said privilege is a hell of a drug.
It is.
Now that is true. That is so true. And even and Democrats can get hooked on that drug too. And millions have.
Mm-hmm.
And you can talk a good game about progressive policies, but be so comfortable in the world as we see it that you don't really get out there and make it happen. That's not really where you put your chops. It's not really where you make your mark. Do you think, if you're right, that to win, that most Americans are with you here, urban, rural, suburban, and to win, Democrats need to go really hard for progressive policies? Do you think that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are prepared to do that? Joe Biden has not been an avatar of strong progressivism through his very long career, and you know that very well. Does he have the stuff to do it now? Is he going to go there? You're in that photo at the top of your Twitter page with the squad. Have they had the sit down in wherever they're in Delaware, or even before, to say, here's the deal, here's what we expect from you, Joe and Kamala? Is the big progressive push in the works, or is it going to be the same old tension, centrist versus progressive?
So I do believe, and this is the optimist in me, like, you got to live here, right? If you're progressive, you have to believe that the world is going to change. Otherwise, you can't do this work. But I do believe we fight, right? And I said that. So I think that now more than ever, DFA has been, we're not new to this, we're true to this. DFA has been at this for 16 years, we'll be 17 years old. So we've been talking about this long before a lot of folks, and we have seen progress happen. And I think this is the time, now more than ever. I reflected on it during the debates. You've got folks, Medicare for All is showing up as a question, and the presidential election, that's progress. We've been fighting for this for a long time. I'm optimistic because I feel like for the first time in a long time since the progressive movement has really been gaining traction, people are thinking, what are progressives going to do? And maybe it's fear. And I'm cool if we got to motivate by fear for a minute. They're worried, what are these folks going to do to me if I don't do something? And I think part of it is because they realize not only that we're the present of the party, but we're the future of the party, and we're bringing everybody with us. And so I'm optimistic because I believe, one, that they know that progressive power is the future, that we got young people with us, that we got people of color, we've got white people, and that is the movement. And I believe they will respond to it. Do I expect Joe Biden every day to be checking in with AOC or Ilhan or Ayanna, asking them what they think about stuff? No, I don't think that's going to happen. Do I expect him to pick up the phone and say, I wonder what Yvette Simpson is thinking today? I do not. What I expect is that we're going to be telling him every day exactly what we need. And we're going to organize people power to make sure that he does it. And I think because of what we saw in the election, we saw there was this big myth, and I love Democratic myth building when they build this strategy. We're going to bring all these Republicans on board, and all these people who hate Trump are going to come and vote, and all these independents are going to come, and we're going to have this big map that shows all of these people voting for Joe Biden. And then we saw what happened. 74 million Americans stood with the guy who has been as bold in his racism, has been as bold in his efficacy, as bold in dragging us all down the hole with him. 74 million Americans still supported Donald Trump. But when you look at that beautiful map of the folks who supported Joe Biden, what you saw was the core and the base of the party. You saw Black and brown people. You saw urban centers and suburban outskirts. You saw the core of the party supporting him. And a lot of those folks are progressive or are believe in progressive values. And so my hope is that whenever Joe Biden feels tempted to lean away from serving people, he will look at that map. I want him looking at that map with all of these beautiful people who stood with him and got him elected. And I want him to remember that when we've got to 2022 right around the corner. We got 2024, which will start tomorrow. Best believe we're going to see some candidates show up on the Republican side for 2024 real soon. I hope he will remember that, and we will remind him. So no, I don't have faith and belief that he's going to wake up and, you know, say, I need to talk to the progressive wing of the party or the progressive leaders in the party today before I make a decision. I think that what's going to happen is we're going to remind him constantly of why the values that we espouse should be ones that he's pushing, and the fact that he's there because we showed up for him.
What makes you think that Neera Tanden is going to turn around after trolling Bernie Sanders for years? She's going to be right there at the right hand of the president all the time. What makes you think she's going to, do you think she woke up on November 7th and said, oh my gosh, we should have gone all in progressive? Well, he chose her. Or now we don't know if she's going to get him, because she's got a sharp tongue as well and a sharp tweet. And a lot of Republicans are saying, oh, she hurt me in my feelings when she tweeted about me. Okay, but tell me why you have this confidence when Joe Biden has chosen her. He may or may not get her, but he's chosen her to sit at his right elbow when he's budgeting. What makes you think that he's going to have progressive impulses running through that administration?
I don't think he will. I think that Neera Tanden, the challenge I think he's going to have with Neera Tanden is that Republicans don't like her and progressives aren't rooting for her. So where does your support come from, right? Like, we're not going to be cheering for her. We don't want her. And so Joe Biden has to think about that. And the question is, where is that support going to come from, right? Like, so I suspect that she probably won't be seated. But no matter who's in that seat, that's what I need to make sure I bring home. Mm-hmm. No matter who's in that seat, what progressives know is that it's our job. We know that we're going to have to fight. We know that we're going to have to make sure that we're pushing. And part of, I think, why Neera Tanden is kind of one of the examples of someone who might not get this is because there is not alignment even within our party. So with Janet Yellen, for instance, she's somebody that progressives thought was, okay, hey, good choice, we'll take it. Joe Biden's like, great, I'm going to piss off Republicans, fine, check them off, but at least I don't have to fight progressives today. With Neera Tanden, he's like, oh my goodness, Republicans don't like her and I got to fight progressives too. So
but he chose her. She was his first
but
choice.
I also wonder how that's going to go once that, once that comes. And we were surprised that progressives have been very vocal about the fact that at least the progressive movement organizers have been very, very vocal about the fact that her previous practices and her philosophies are not in line, not just with progressives, but I think with most Americans. And you started to see other organizations stepping up too. I think to say that. And so I think at the end of the day, what we know, and so I'm telling you, Tom, I do not believe that Joe Biden is going to wake up every day and say, what can I do for progressives today? I do not. Okay. I think what he's going to say is, I've got to serve the people. Republicans aren't going to be with me. How do I not piss off progressives today? I don't want to have this fight today. And I think over time, particularly if what I expect is going to happen, which is progressive alignment, continued pushing, we're going to start making more and more this case, not just to Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, but to the American people about the fact that how is your life different now than it was before? And the reality is you've bought into this propaganda that I should be tracking my taxes and not the amount of money I got in my bank account, that I should be conceding to some sort of crazy value that capitalism in its own self, unchecked, unregulated, is great for me when I'm making less money and my boss is making even more. And so I think we're going to be talking to American people and saying, if you're in rural America, you're broke, you're struggling. As a result of the policies that are put forward, you are in a similar position as the people who are in urban America. So why don't we all decide that healthcare is what we all need, and let's work together on making that happen? And that was the point I was making to Heidi Heitkamp on the Sunday show, where she had talked about how the folks in North Dakota are excited about climate and they're ready to work on it, but they don't want the radical left, radicalized ideas. And what I said to her was, Heidi, progressives want people in North Dakota to breathe clean air too. We are inclusive. We want everyone to be better. And so you don't serve yourself or anybody by saying that the ideas that we espouse and the way that we do that is radical.
Okay,
You know?
let the people judge here.
Yeah.
Yvette Simpson is with us. She's CEO of Democracy for America, big progressive organization across this country, in line with the Squad and progressives in Congress. They put candidates up. They fight for those candidates. They're active, very active right now in Georgia, where, of course, there's a runoff for those 2 seats for the U.S. Senate, which will determine whether or not there's going to be a Republican majority, whether or not Mitch McConnell will still be the master of the Senate. People listening and watching here online, and David asks, which policies are your priorities? Let me put that, we want to hear that, but let me put it just a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
What's your vision? And put some policy behind this, but what's your vision for this country? If you had your way, what does this country look like in 20 years?
Ooh, this is fun. I like this exercise. Let's do this.
Okay, good. Let's do this.
So I believe and I vision for an America where no matter where you live, where you're born, where you come from, you have a government that understands that you should be healthy, that you should have an equal shot and the ability to raise your family at a fair wage, that you should be able to breathe clean air and drink clean water, that no matter what you look like, you shouldn't be judged unfairly based on the color of your skin, that you should be able to walk out the front door and not worry about whether you're going to be shot, killed, unarmed by racist police. I believe in an America that actually serves people. And that's not ideal. Like, that is the minimum standard. If we consider ourselves a civilized country, a first world country, the idea that people are dying every single day in this country because they don't have healthcare, that does not make us civilized or first world.
Can you point to a country out there right now, Yvette, that approximates what you'd like to see in America? Is there a country that you would say, well, something like this or something like that?
Well, I mean, I do think on the healthcare front alone, we know that there are first world countries throughout Europe, in particular, and in Canada that are doing healthcare right. In the middle, and I'm just going to be as transparent, knowing a lot of people are watching, in the middle of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor this year, I started to wonder if I certainly want to pack my bags and find another country. And I was curious about what country I could go to as a Black American, as a Black woman, where I would feel safe. Certainly some countries are doing it better, but that's the big question. So racism in America reflects a lot similar to a lot of other countries, of course, outside of the African countries and the African diaspora, where you're having still real trouble. Look at what's happened in the UK and other places, Canada as well. And so I don't believe that there's a place I can go to today unless Wakanda is real, I'd go there today, where as a Black American, I'd feel safe. But I do believe that there are examples. So I believe that, our allies in other countries where they've been doing healthcare well for a while, for instance. I think income inequality.
You're talking about countries where healthcare is a guarantee, where it's state backed.
We certainly saw several countries do the COVID pandemic right. We were talking about doing UBI, and actually that was a proposal that Kamala Harris made, along with a couple other senators, that during the pandemic, we actually provide a flat monthly payment to people so that they can live, right? Because
what's
what
UBI?
we knew was,
Universal Basic Income, right?
Yes, I'm sorry, using acronyms.
Oh, and there are a lot of countries in Europe who are paying workers a large portion of the wages they would have made if they could work, if Corona is keeping them off the job.
Right.
It's unbelievable the way, America can look downright savage. I don't know if that's a PC word these days, but by that I mean ruthless.
Yeah.
For its own people, and in a way that other countries are not. What about economically? Our style of capitalism versus others. Are there other countries that you could point to and say, well, I would want to do it more like, I don't know, Canada, Germany, the Netherlands, I don't know, Sweden, you name it. Is there?
I think at the very foundation, right? At the very foundation. So, my progressive family members stick with me here.
Okay.
But at the very foundation, regulated capitalism that says, that during our worst times, people who are at the bottom and at the middle have the same opportunity to do better with their lives than what we see at the top. What we just saw, which is actually, I agree, is savage. What we saw happen during this pandemic, where the top 1% of people who have wealth grew their wealth at a time when most Americans were suffering, small businesses were closing. That is the opposite of what we want.
Grew
at the
by
very
trillions
foundation
during the pandemic.
Yeah, at the very foundation, our governmental policy should not enrich the rich and damn the poor. It should be a place where there is a level playing field, if you can, with regulated capitalism. So that means that I really do have a fair shot. What we've seen in America is this deep divide where the rich are getting richer. People who manage businesses are making 300, 400 times the people who are working in it, a value of real work. So on my you asked me to vision big, and I did.
Yes.
But at the very foundation, if we can't agree to a minimum wage that clocks with inflation, so we don't have to get back here, because by the time we pass $15 an hour, that's not going to be enough, right? Mm-hmm. So having wages that if I work 40 hours a week, I can live and raise a family, very minimum, right? And giving people, there was this time when we talked about the American dream. You come to America, no matter where you come from, you're born here, and you have this great opportunity to work really hard, and that's gone. American exceptionalism, gone. This idea that America is this amazing country where anything, pandemic, we are getting so disrespected, rightly so, by leaders of other countries who are saying, America, sit down. You're not the greatest anymore because of the way that you serve your people. And it's so funny how a pandemic, a leader who is so individualistic, so selfish, could really put us on that claim. New Zealand, for instance, I think run by a woman. We can talk about that. I think the women leaders around the world are doing a really great job. Is a country where you saw them really, really take this pandemic seriously, where they said, here's what we're going to do. We're all in this together. We're going to make sure that we lock down together and make sure everybody's protected during that. And then when we can all come back out, we're going to be able to do that much easier and much better. And so I think we learn a lot about leadership and our country's potential at times like this. And what I said to the Democratic leadership at some point not long ago, is that if you can't deliver for people during a pandemic, if you can't say healthcare for all is important during a pandemic, if you can't say support for small businesses and for individuals and families is important during a pandemic, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it really, really wrong. This is a time where you should not have to apologize for giving people what they need. And so I envision, Tom, a country that lives up to as Biden has said, lives up to the promises that they've made.
Well, why do you think, Yvette, why do you think there's so many people who appear to be afraid of the vision that you paint? Like
privilege,
you said,
white supremacy, the fact that a lot of people are comfortable. I think Martin Luther King says something like, you're going to know when that you've gotten, I'm going to be skewered for getting Martin Luther King wrong, but basically what he said, trying to paraphrase what he said, was that real change happens when it starts to hurt the people who are in power. But and that until we get to the place where the people who are comfortable are uncomfortable, we're not going to get to the place where we can make the kind of change that we need. And I think that was part of what we saw kind of converge. And I think what's happening is there are a lot of people who have been really, really comfortable. And I will venture to say that people didn't like Donald Trump. A lot of people hated him. But there were some folks who were like, I'm doing pretty good here. My bank account still looks good. I'm going to go ahead and check the box. And so what we need is for people who are comfortable, no matter who is in leadership, to get uncomfortable with the fact that there's a bunch of us who suffer the weight of failed leadership time and time again, frankly, whether it's a D or an R, and say that's not what our country should be about. Part of the reason why we have such apathy, and rightly so, in the electorate is because some people, their world hasn't changed no matter what. The world has never changed for them, whether it was Bill Clinton or whether it was Barack Obama. Their world has not changed. And so my hope, my expectation, particularly because I know that the progressive movement is strong and with us, is that we fight for our leadership to see that and to actually change the world. And that was the nature of my comment, for the people who have been waiting for it. And that's the essence of representative leadership, is making sure that every single person feels like they've got somebody in leadership who is looking for them, who is checking for them, who is making sure their world is better. And honestly, you can take this another way. I have an MBA, economy is kind of my jam. an economy where most people aren't able to buy and do and get houses is an economy that's not working for our country. A pandemic where you lose 200,000 people who pay taxes, who live in houses and pay taxes and on that, who buy goods, is not good for our economy. Death is not good for our economy. Poverty is not good for our economy. So if we actually do the things that I'm talking about, Tom, not only is it great for the people, which it should be, and that should be our focus, but it actually makes our country stronger.
How do you get past 74 million votes for Donald Trump? Now, that's a lot of votes.
It is a lot of votes.
80 million is
it's
more.
What's keeping me awake at night, Tom, is that, and I want to know every single one of those people. I want them to keep those hats on so I know you when you coming.
Okay. You know, they're not all rich. They're not all super rich. They're not all even in good shape at all.
Right.
So, and yet I'm sure you've seen and heard, you know, all the footage we all have of people at Trump rallies just rabid for him.
Yeah.
How do you explain that?
Okay, let's break it down. Racism, white privilege, white supremacy. So if you were born white in this country, you were told that no matter how low you got, there was always going to be somebody lower than you because they were Black. You were told that your value as a white person is attributed not to what you bring, who you are, what kind of person you are, but your whiteness. And that Black people don't have that same privilege, that they're less than you, no matter how good they are. And we built a whole system of government and country around that principle. So you can imagine how fearful white people who support Donald Trump are at the idea that that's not true, right? That like, hey, I might be poor, I might have nothing, but at least I'm not Black. And now we're saying that Black Lives Matter. And now we're saying that Black people are as valuable as you. And now we're saying that they should have the same rights as you do, that our country should support them, that some of them might actually, because they are, be better than you. And it created a lot of white fear. And Donald Trump grabbed onto that fear, right? And saying, oh man, there was a time in this country, let's make America great again, at a time where just being white made you better than at least the Black neighbor next to you. And maybe it made you better than the Black neighbor who has a college degree makes more than you. I mean, we know that there are studies in this country that suggest that if you're white in America and you have a high school diploma, you have a better shot at reaching the highest levels than a Black neighbor who has a college degree. And let's talk about the criminal justice system, because we know that if you're white in America, you're less likely to come into contact with that system, be arrested, be shot and killed. And so what is happening is this huge amount of fear on the part of white people who were taught that your value is in your whiteness and that makes you better than Black people, and a whole system that supported that. Let's go through the history of redlining and discrimination and all of that. And now we're saying, no, actually, your value is in who you are, what you bring to the table, how you treat people. And that's got to stand on its own. And guess what? Black people are just as valuable as you are. Not more valuable. Black people aren't saying, when we say Black Lives Matter, we aren't saying that we're better. We're saying we deserve to be treated equally.
Okay, so
and we know that the system hasn't done that.
Okay, so I get it. And now here we are, and that's 80 million something for Biden Harris, 74 million Trump. A lot of those people may share exactly the fear and perspective that you do about a country that may change its way of dealing with race. It's going to have to, because of the demographics of this country. But the passage between where we've been and where we're going is dangerous. And we've seen that. I mean, just look in the streets. We've seen it. So far, you know, they didn't kidnap the governor of Michigan. They didn't put her on trial and God knows what, kill her. They haven't come out marching, Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. It hasn't happened. Maybe it will not. But you know that there's a lot of hot language out there, and you're talking about changes that would threaten some of those enormous fortunes that have accumulated during this time of inequality. Now you put the white fear that you're talking about together with some of those people with those fortunes may be prepared to do just about anything to stay super rich. How do you see what's going to determine whether we go forward toward a change that accommodates the reality of what this country is demographically and stays true to our high ideals? What puts us on that road versus this crazy civil war road that people talk about? What is going to determine which way we go?
I think that once we finally have an honest conversation and confront race in this country and what it's meant, and we decide that we're going to go forward in this conversations, frankly, 400 years too late. And we talk about that and we decide that we're going to go forward with that. I think if we, and it's not going to be easy, it's going to be ugly and it's going to be messy. And I think if we had just had that fight and that conversation real authentically and said, here's who we are as a country. We know our wounds, we know our scars, we know our dark places. And we're just going to confront that. And we're going to say, this country was founded on racism. This entire system was built to be unequal from the very beginning. We're going to correct that starting now, which we've seen other countries do and been able to get through and past. It doesn't change it forever. And certainly the people are still hurt about that in certain places, but at least we confront it. And we say we're going to do something about it. I think that's where we get. When I'm having conversations on panels with people who are saying that they are offended and feel oppressed at the being called racist and don't understand that if you've been the subject of racism, that's the true oppression. I have people who say that my freedom is being infringed upon because I have to wear a mask, and they don't understand that walking out the front door, if you're an African American, is a dangerous exercise in some places and in most places in this country, and that's true oppression. And that is privilege. That is the privilege of saying, oh my God, you're restricting my freedom. No, slavery is the restriction of freedom. No, Jim Crow is our criminal justice system, being Black in America. And so I think we've just got to have this very real conversation as a country to say that we were a racist country as our foundation. We still are. We're going to do the work now to correct that by any means necessary, however that works. And we're going to do that at every single level. I want to see corporations do that. I want to see celebrities do that. I want to see our government do that. And we're going to finally say it. You are not more valuable in this country based on the color of your skin. Our value is who we are as people, what we contribute, how we treat each other, and that will be the case going forward. You do not get the chance to have laws created that make you advantaged because of the color of your skin and a Black person disadvantaged. And that's all I think we've all ever needed, was this level playing field. And no, I mean, the correction of all of the ills and skills that we've seen in this country against Black people, it takes time to fix and correct. What we've done, Tom, is the opposite. We've dug in. We replaced slavery with prison. And Black wealth in this country is not at a better place than it was 200 years ago because of systems, because of our government, because of the way that we continue to elevate whiteness and promote white supremacy in this country, and the way that we coddle privilege in this country.
You think we can flip that story peacefully? No,
I don't think that. I think significant change, particularly in most places, takes a lot of pain. All my friends who have children always say, good things, anything good, any real change happens through pain. That's why when babies are born, it's a painful experience, but it's also a beautiful thing that comes out on the other side.
Well, pain is one thing, but conflict.
Oh yeah, but I think there's going to be a lot of conflict, but we have conflict now. Look what's happening right now. There is still a lot of racism that is causing people their lives every single day, and it's hurting some people more than others. So let's be clear about the fact that, yes, I think it will not be peaceful. It will require some pain. But I think once
but not peaceful and pain are different. I mean, change can be painful, right? It may be rewarding ultimately, but it can be painful. But not peaceful.
Conflict. I think there will be conflict.
Peaceful. But these days, you see the guns in those streets.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot, and then you get footage of a Black militia in Kentucky somewhere, and pretty soon you think, oh my God, what's happening here? I mean, that's what I'm trying to get my finger on. Do you want to, when you look at that 74 million who went with Trump and who by going with Trump, they're saying, no, Yvette, I'm not down with your policies. Right. I guess. I mean, even if some other part of them might actually like them. At the moment.
Well, we didn't talk a lot about our policies, by the way, in this election. So that's one part, but let's keep going.
but are you looking to persuade them or conquer them?
You mean the 74 million people?
Yeah.
It depends. I don't believe, and I talked, part of the essence of the unity is great, freedom is better, is that I don't believe there are some people we're going to be able to compromise with, because they just won't, right? And I don't believe I should have to compromise with people who don't believe that my life matters, or believe that I should have the same chance at a great life as they do, or that I should be treated equally based on my contributions, how I treat people, and what I do in this world. So I don't believe that there are going to be people that we're going to be able to peacefully bring along, frankly. But I do think that there are going to be people that will. And I think this conversation has had to happen for so long. And I think that's where white allies and other folks who are in positions of power are going to be very important to this conversation. We saw that happen, just a ray of sunshine in all this darkness. We saw that happen a little. I saw white friends having conversations with white family members that they've never had before about race in America this year. I saw them confront family members who they know are racist and talk them down. And I think that's where it starts to happen. You know, I do believe, and this is, again, a lot of folks are gonna not love this, but this is just my spirit. I do believe that when we get back to our humanity, our very root in our humanity, I think that's when we see each other. And I do believe that there is a way when we start to have these, like, strip away for a minute all the policies and the polarizing ways that we talk about things, strip all of that away. I think if we look people in the eye and we talk to people, especially where there's already a relationship of trust, maybe a familial relationship, and we start to say, look, here's who we are as people, and we need to be better humans. We need to love each other more. We need to, if we start to talk about where we align rather than where we diverge, I think we start to see that movement happen. Because guess what? That's how it was created a certain way. There's this beautiful thing about babies and young kids when they're born and they come into the world and they don't see these things this way. You know, all the little babies we see, and then that's taught, it's built.
But you and I both know America has managed to turn its back on that childlike love for centuries.
Yes.
We both know that. So we know there's no easy way here.
I don't think it's easy. I might not see it in my lifetime, but Martin Luther King didn't see it in his either. So it's not about necessarily doing it fast, but I think we need to do it aggressively. And I think we need to do it authentically. And I think we need to do it boldly, and not the way we've been doing it, where we had a whole week of RNC where nobody on that stage would acknowledge that racism exists in our country.
Well, I guess you don't get to call there too. Another question coming in here. Is your guest, is Yvette, calling for violence to bring about the political change that she's pushing for?
Calling for violence. That sounds really rhetoric filled and a little bit propaganda.
You know,
I'm not calling for violence. I just believe that it will. I believe that when you're talking about, we had a civil war in this country, and you were talking about armed people who believe that they have a right to this country because they are white, and that we're taking something from them by making our country more equitable, which it should have been in the first place. I'm saying that I believe that if that's what we're confronting, I believe that we may see that. And honestly, I don't want to see that. I love this country, but I also want this country to change. And I don't want it to be like this forever. And frankly, and there are people in this country who are dying in this country based on the way it is right now. There is a lot of violence in our country based on the way it is. It happens to be focused on a certain group of people. And if you're not in that group, you might feel real comfortable. So no, I'm not calling for violence. Nobody's doing that. Of course not. I would love for those folks to put their guns down and have a conversation. Put the gun down, grab a beer, let's sit down and talk. I don't know that they will.
Barack Obama has been more in the public eye lately. He's got a new memoir out, and politics have been very hot in the home stretch to the presidential election. And since then, he's been more visible. When you look back on the Obama years, and Joe Biden was right there, what do you think about opportunities grabbed and opportunities missed?
So let me first say, our first African-American president, who did run as a progressive in 2008, was endorsed by DFA in 2006 for his Senate run. The Hope and Change candidate, the community organizer, inspired a whole generation of people to run. And unfortunately, once he got into leadership, was influenced to not do any of the things that he said he was going to do as it relates to progress. Now, I will say, as a Black American in this country, I also was not going to put a Black tax on him and expect him to change the whole world as the first African American president with 8 years of time. I think there were some people who were like, if he just stays alive and doesn't have scandal, then he's accomplished the mission as the first African American president. But yes, there was an expectation and a dream. For instance, healthcare. We expected and we knew that Barack Obama was a proponent of universal healthcare. And then special interests, people inside his own administration said, can't do that, don't do that, not gonna work, not gonna happen, didn't happen. So yes, I do believe a lot of progressives are rightly frustrated by the fact that we did not see that kind of progress. And I would say Barack Obama probably feels that way too, right? I heard him speak at John Lewis's funeral, and he talked about all the things that he didn't think he got done and the things that he endeavors to get done now. And of course, you have a lot more latitude to talk about those things when you're not in the seat. And so I think he could actually be a force for good. I'm not seeing that this week with his most recent statement, but he can be a force for good as a unifier and someone to push real progress, and say, we didn't get it all done, we didn't do it all right, but we can now, let's do it.
Are you talking about when he had a Snapchat conversation recently where he said, don't use defund police? Yeah, it's a snappy statement, but it sets you back in your real mission. Is he wrong?
It's the third time that he has been used and used himself rather than to divide the party, rather than to unite the party to divide the party. I don't think him being used to or using himself to push down the very forces in our party who are making real change when he is the hope and change president. So here's what I think about what he said. And I know a lot of people are commenting on this. I don't expect to be the smartest person about it.
I mean, he was talking, in a way, he's talking marketing. He said,
yeah,
don't use that phrase because you're going to turn so many people off that you may end up being less likely to get what you actually want. And there may be other ways to describe it.
Well, break that down, right? Break that down. What people? Is it the very people who don't want me to be free and don't want Black people to live anyway? Because at the end of the day, I don't care what you call it. I am a supporter of defund the police personally. We are a part of the movement for Black lives, and we're partnering in all of that work. And we understand the movement and we're here for it. I don't care what you call it. What are you going to do about it?
What do you mean when you say
What are you going to do about it?
What do you mean by defund the police?
Defund the police means, let me take it back to a big picture. I'm running a company, XYZ company, and XYZ company serves certain clients. And I look at my balance sheet and I see, wait a minute, my division over here is killing my clients. They're supposed to protect and serve, but what they're doing is actually murdering our clients. If I'm a business owner, am I going to continue to fund that department? I mean, business owners kill departments and defund departments because they're not performing to metrics. If I'm running a hospital and my doctors start killing my patients, am I going to keep those doctors on board? And so defund means that we have a structural systemic racism in our police department that is causing lives of the very people who pay their Black people pay taxes, who pay their salaries, who fund our government, and who are supposed to be able to call the police and get protection. And what they're getting is the exact opposite. And so we need to change that. And the way that we change that in a capitalist society is we defund, we move our money from that to something else until that changes. I've always believed that our police department serves white people the way that they're supposed to be served, right? There's not over policing in suburbs. You don't just have police cars just rolling around, stopping people, putting them on the ground and handcuffing them. Black people want to be served the same way, and we're not, and that's not okay. And so if the only way to change that is to defund, re-envision, reinvest, then that's what we should do. And so, and it's more important than XYZ Corporation because we're not making widgets, Tom. We're talking about real humans.
But you know, so, what some people hear, the ones that I guess President Obama was talking about, when they hear defund police, they hear take away public security forces. And yet, but they're thinking, but yet there are.
They're saying take
criminals.
away my public safety forces.
Well,
for a whole
okay.
bunch of people in this country, that is not what they are. They're not that.
Okay, but why not reform police, or why not, I don't know. The idea, I mean, maybe you're right. When you say they're killing their clients, you may not be right, because maybe their clients are not Black people.
But they are, because Black people are paying them.
Well, I know what you're saying, but historically.
And it's their job, it's in their mission.
Well, I know that, but the fact is that many people have pointed to how our police forces grew out of slavery.
Yeah.
And groups put together to catch runaway slaves and all that jazz. So strictly speaking, you may be right, but they may not.
They may be doing the very. You saying time they may be doing the very thing that they were formed to do.
Maybe, but
I agree with that.
Still, Obama's point is when you say defund, you may freak out people that you need to bring along.
That's okay. What I think should happen.
Not okay if you lose a dozen seats in Congress. It's not.
That's
okay
not why we lost the seats, though, and that's propaganda and that's messaging. That's not true. We did not, and we need to say that for the record.
Okay.
None of the people who lost their seats ran on defund, talked about defund. None of them did that, and that was not what our Biden said 2 days after he didn't support defund. So so don't blame progressives for what we didn't do. We get blamed no matter what. Okay. We win. We win. It's our fault. We lose. It's our fault. Don't do that. We do not have that kind of power. And at least in that way. If you ran on defund and you lost, call me. That would mean that the strategy didn't work. But there were a lot of people who lost their seats or didn't win because they were running away from issues, period. They didn't talk about how they want to serve people. They thought they would just be able to be anti-Trump and avoid making real bold statements about how they were going to serve, and they didn't win. That's very, very different. But let me give you some context. Black Lives Matter. When Black Lives Matter was formed in, I think it was 2000, it was right after Trayvon Martin, 2009, maybe?
I remember, yeah.
And I should know that by heart. There were people who couldn't say Black Lives Matter and thought that was offensive.
The words, the very idea, the words themselves, yeah.
Defund is the same way. There are people who just right away, they're like, what? No, that sounds awful. But now everybody got a t-shirt that says Black Lives Matter. Everybody's business has a Black Lives Matter. We should not be consumed or concerned about how we talk about these things. The activist movement used that language because it's understandable. When South Africa had apartheid, there was a defund strategy to get rid of apartheid. And there were cities across the United States that stopped doing business with South America, stopped sending them money. And guess what happened? Apartheid ended.
Yeah.
So sometimes the power of the purse is the only way to get real change. And if we have to do that and say those things in order to save one Black life, it is worth it. And what I need, the most powerful, most loved, I love him too, the most impactful president in the history of our country to do is to realize that he needs to use his power to help push forward the result and not to give oxygen to folks who are talking about how we talk about it. I often say, I don't care how you speak to me, I only care about how you treat me, right?
The most impactful president in American history?
Oh, yeah.
More than George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, FDR, Barack Obama? He's
one of the most. I should say one of them. I'll say one of the most. To me.
Yeah.
To me.
He made history in a gigantic way.
He did.
No question about
and let's be clear, being the first African-American president in these here United States to walk away as the most popular, to walk away without scandal, to walk away still intact, alive. That is something that George Washington did not have to contend with or worry about so much.
Yeah. Let me ask you about, if I may, and I know there are a lot of very impressive people out there, but AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, has made such a big impression. When I watch and listen to her and the precision of her critiques and descriptions of this country, it is arresting. I mean, I am riveted. I mean, I'd always agree, but man, can she get in there with a scalpel and really go right to it and cut through the, sort of crusty old layers and get down to what matters. What do you see in her future? She's young, but what do you see coming there?
You know, I would say, so DFA, I think, was one, if not the only progressive organization to support all 4 members of the squad in their primaries, and AOC was one of them.
So this is your work, Democracy for America. That's where you put your fork in.
Yeah,
you were there.
We were there. And still are, because, you know, the battle doesn't end once you get people elected. You got to also help them push forward the policies and push the messaging they need. You know, I think her star is bright, just like Ayanna Pressley, who is also, I hear her speak, she's so powerful. Katie Porter was one of our candidates, and everybody's afraid of that white boy.
Oh yeah, man, she can really,
she's powerful too.
She can really do it.
I see AOC and others really not only just being the leaders of the progressive movement going forward, but the leaders of this country. And I think partly because of what you just said, you don't have to agree with her policy, but you agree that what she's saying, you listen, you know that she's saying something that's important, and you know that she's saying something that should be listened to. And I think that's where, you know, there was a time in this country where certain people got to lead in Congress or Senate because it was their birthright. You know, you went to the right school, or you had the right family. And what this new generation of progressive leaders is showing us is that actually that's not true. And the fact that these leaders are getting, I think, well-deserved attention means that we need more people who have the lived experiences of everyday Americans, have the ability to talk very honestly, authentically, and plainly about what is happening in this country. And I think they're inspiring a whole new generation of people who are regular, everyday people to run and to take those seats that people believe that they were born to have. And I think that's what's going to happen. I do think that because she is young, she's going to have quite a bit of time to be able to do that. I think that this is the last gasp of the old guard of the Democratic Party. I think this is it. I think this was it. And I think what's going to start to shift in this next couple cycles, is particularly starting in 2024 and beyond, is you're going to see younger, you're going to see more diverse, you're going to see many different lived experiences and backgrounds. You're going to see nurses and teachers and cab drivers and bartenders and folks really saying, I can do this, I can lead. And I'm really inspired by that. I'm really inspired by that.
Unless we want to become a really double ugly country with more overt racial oppression and a kind of a racial police state, we're going to have to change, because we're changing demographically.
Yeah.
And you said you're ready for conflict in that process, because change like that takes conflict. But make the other argument. Make the positive appeal to people who may have enjoyed their white privilege, but might be open to tell them why it would be good to go down this road. I mean, myself personally, I know white privilege is real. I know I've benefited for it, even though I came up with 0 silver spoon. I know it still helped me. But it looks a whole lot more appealing and attractive to me as a human being to live in a country where there is not a racial hierarchy, because I want to be some kind of big family with my fellow countrymen and women. But you tell those people who may be uncomfortable with your vision, why should they welcome it?
I think that if we as a country serve all people in the way that they need to be served, I think this could happen much less painfully and without conflict. I think part of the fear that we're seeing on behalf of some people is, yes, I believe my value is in privilege, and I believe I'm losing something because the country is becoming browner and we're starting to acknowledge equality. But I also believe if those people felt like they were supported, if our country supported people, you talk about folks without silver spoons, if we actually had a country where we lived up to the ideal that we take care of people first, I think that goes down a little smoother, right? Like part of the myth that we tell white working class people is that, you know, those immigrants are coming to take your job. Black people are going to take your job. Guess what that creates? This survival must stop the people coming for my job. Don't say that. Say that in this country, we value work. And we've got enough room, you know, like, you want to work, let's do it. I think part of that comes from a natural fear that I'm losing something. And I don't know that if our country starts to actually serve people, I have love for my white rural people and farmers as much as I do for my fellow Americans in urban America. And so if we actually serve people and people didn't feel like there was this huge tension that the very little piece I've got is going to be taken away and I must protect at all costs, I think we get there. I think if we start to actually encourage people to get from behind their circles and out from behind their computers, these little abuse pads that we use every single day to spew things at people we don't know, and actually get to know people, I think that's where we get there. I think we get there, but we're not doing that. We're doing the opposite, right? And so what I would say to those people is, you're valuable, I'm valuable. We can build a country together that takes care of all of us, make sure that we're all good. We all bleed red. We all have value. I don't hate you for who you are. Don't hate me for who I am. I am not the reason for your pain. I am not the reason that that you don't have what you need. And we should both want a country that makes it so that both of us can do really well. And we do that by pushing for policy that puts people first. Because honestly, it's not the black and white divide in this country that is the real fight. It's the rich and poor fight. It's really about socioeconomic. And what we're going to find is that all of us are going to be at the bottom of the barrel together looking at each other like, what are we going to do? And you're worried about using the word socialism when it turns out that we all down here at the bottom of the barrel. I don't care what you call it. I need it to serve me. And so I think that's where we start to get there. I think if we can have those conversations, if we can build a country, and again, my eternal optimist wants to believe that that's possible. But the reason why I'm worried is because we're not having those conversations, because people are armed, because this has been indoctrinated in them for generations, because we just had a president that fueled that fire and a bunch of Republicans that are continuing to put gasoline on it, continuing to fuel it. And I don't know that that's going to change. I don't control that part. What I do believe is that if the Democratic Party sees what I see, what we all see, is that if we serve people first, now we've got a stronger country, people are doing better. And there's not a whole lot of room for hate when you're living right. When people are doing well, a lot less likely to hate somebody. When people are suffering, that hate becomes very, very easy and it grows. So I think that's where it is. And I do think we have to have, again, those honest conversations about race in this country. And we have to confront it, and we can't run away from it. I cannot have one person on major network TV or in leadership say that there's no racism in this country. We got to start from there.
Yvette Simpson, Chief Executive Officer of Democracy for America.
It's so fun, Tom.
You are great. I enjoyed this so much. Come back and talk to us to do a little check-in on the Biden-Harris administration. After we see what starts to really unfold, I'd love to come back and sit down and talk about it again, see what you're seeing.
Absolutely. You'll see and hear us pushing and yelling constantly as that happens. Right. But yes, let's do it. Be good. Good luck. I wish you a good 2021. We're coming up on it. Let us pray it's better than 2020. Well, democracy restored. That's a good start. That's a big start. Yvette, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you. Bye for now. Bye. Listeners, viewers, thank you very much for being here. We love your questions. We love the fact that you're there, that you're engaged with us. It's fantastic. Thanks a lot for joining us today. See you again soon. Bye for now.